Well, good morning, everyone. Before we start reading, it is a truth universally acknowledged that Google is listening to our conversations. So I'm getting so much more, like, I have like Jane Austen alerts open, notifications on my phone now. Notifications turned on for Jane Austen. But I got this article from the New York Times on my feed, and then my mom sent it to me. So I was like, I should read it. And it's called The Forgotten Writers Who Influenced Jane Austen. In Jane Austen's bookshelf, a rare book collector sets out to investigate a group of overlooked female writers. It's a book called Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, which is very cool. A very cool New York Times article, like the authors who influenced this author. I love that. I'll just read a little bit of it. It is a truth universally acknowledged, at least in publishing, that books about books sell well, which is such a fun idea to me at this time of like, let's read a book about this book. Not me in college, but me now. And judging by the profusion, that includes those devoted to Jane Austen, Inc. Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, related to Mitt Romney? No, I don't know. Would seem optimized for readers who like to absorb their masterpieces by osmosis. Yet it springs from a place more personal and idiosyncratic than the cozy title might suggest. Put it another way, I certainly didn't expect to make so many furious notes in the margins. Another notes in the margins book for me. How exciting. A longtime dealer in rare books who has made regular appearances on the TV show Pawn Stars and who knows her Richardson from her Fielding. I don't get that reference. Romney had come to believe that Austen was, if not unique among women writers of her time, certainly superior, that her place in the canon must rest, at least partly, on the relative inferiority of her peers. Then she read Frances Burney and realized how many writers had not just influenced Austen, but been great in their own right, and I would love to read their books too. There's simply not enough time in the whole wide world to read all these books out loud on the internet and have fun with them. Here's a quote. In spite of my supposed professional curiosity, I realized that I missed something, Romney writes, and it stung. Anyway, as a New York Times article does, it goes on and on and on, and it's so fascinating, and you should check it out for yourself. And I'm excited to get that book and read it for myself and share what I learned. And I also sent myself another article about Jane Austen because they just keep appearing to me. And it's called Why Jane Austen's Work Remains a Beloved Classic. No, Pride and Prejudice. Why Jane Austen's Work Remains a Beloved Classic. By Pilar Gonzalez. 212 years after its date of publication. Can you even imagine? Pride and Prejudice continues to inspire countless adaptations, winning the hearts of so many. And this article also starts out, it's a truth universally acknowledged that, this is the quote from the book. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, the truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. Reads the famous first lines of Pride and Prejudice, marking the start of one of English literature's greatest novels and love stories. We're reading one of the greatest novels and love stories, and I know I'm not doing it justice, and I'm happy to learn more and more and more as I go down this little rabbit hole that I'm finding myself in, and I'm happy to learn and make myself knowledgeable about all the things. What will pop out at us today? Who knows? So those two, I'll probably try and write something about them in the description of my video, as one does. And today we're going to read chapter XLI 50 minus 10 plus 1. 41. Right? Yeah. And last time we were just exploring the word verdure. I know that was a weird sentence. It's just greenery. Just remember really getting stuck up on that. And everybody's still just marinating on what happened in Kent, and what happened to Jane, and what happened to Lizzie, and now there's a whole Brighton thing. Lydia may go to Brighton, and don't know about that. And Mrs. Bennet actually did seem a little bit happy to see Lizzie, which was nice. A nice change for her. And Darcy did propose to Elizabeth. And she said no. And then he wrote her a big long note. And we read all that last time. He wrote her a big long letter. 2 pages, and filled up the envelope, Darcy did. And now she's like, oh, I missed something. And I do love how this book was at first called First Impressions. I think I've mentioned that before. Some background in this article about Pride and Prejudice. Before exploring the things that make Pride and Prejudice so beloved, it's helpful to understand how it came to be. It was Austen's second published novel, the first being Sense and Sensibility. Originally titled First Impressions, she later changed it to the title we know today. While she stated on the manuscript in 1796 and finished the first draft 10 months later, the book was published in 1813 when she was 37 years old. It's incredible. Its early draft was initially rejected by London publisher Cattle and Davies. Screw you guys. Before Austen made considerable edits and sent it to publisher Thomas Egerton, who purchased its copyright for £110 at the time. During her lifetime, Austen never published her works under her real name and remained anonymous. Sense and Sensibility was credited as having been made by a lady, while Pride and Prejudice's byline simply stated, by the author of Sense and Sensibility. It's funny to me. There's this really cool edition that was published in 1894 that was illustrated by Hugh Thompson, and it has the iconic peacock imagery on the cover. Meant not only to represent the opulence of the novel's world, but also the protagonist's prideful nature. That's cool. It's a cool looking book. I wonder if I can make this bigger. It's a really cool looking... That's cool. That's cool. To be like a book collector of like the rarest. I'd love to see the drafts of people. I mean, would you love to see the first draft of Pride and Prejudice? That would be cool to see like how it started and where it finished. Okay, I'm sorry. Chapter 41. The first week of their return was soon gone. The second began. It was the last of the regiment's stay in Meryton, and all the young ladies in the neighbourhood were drooping apace. I'm gonna underline that. That's really, really funny. But I do want to look that up because that is a funny saying. Drooping apace. What do you have to say about that? advancing, drooping. Anything that droops or sags in melancholy. Oh my god. At a quick, swiftly drooping. Drooping apace. Ugh! The dejection was almost universal. The elder Miss Bennet. The elder Miss Bennets alone were still able to eat, drink, and sleep, and pursue the usual course of their employments. And then the younger ones weren't even able to survive. Very frequently were they reproached for this insensibility by Kitty and Lydia, whose own misery was extreme. Extreme misery. And who could not comprehend such hard-heartedness in any of the family. Good heaven, what is to become of us? What are we to do? Would they often exclaim in the bitterness of woe, how can you be smiling so, Lizzie? Their affectionate mother shared all their grief. She remembered what she had herself endured on similar occasion 25 years ago. Whoa, she's like, I was in love with a soldier at one time in my life, and it is so sad. She's really good at mirroring dramatic emotions. I am sure, said she, I cried for 2 days together when Colonel Miller's regiment went away. I thought I should have broken my heart. I thought I should have broken my heart. I am sure I shall break mine, said Lydia. If one could but go to Brighton, observed Mrs. Bennet. Oh, yes, if one could go to Brighton, but Papa is so disagreeable. A little sea bathing would set me up forever. There it is. Okay, I went to the ocean, and my friend was like, that's very Jane Austen, and I was like, it was right around the time I was like thinking about this idea of reading this out loud, and I was like, I have no idea of what you speak. I don't know if did she talk about that? But I think it's in regards to this line right here that I am going to underline. A little sea bathing would set me up forever. If that were true, if only that were true, I guess it could be true. We just have to make it happen. And my Aunt Phillips is sure it would do me a great deal of good too, added Kitty. Such were the kind of lamentations resounding perpetually through the Longbourn house. Elizabeth tried to be diverted by them, but all sense of pleasure was lost in shame. She felt anew in the justice of Mr. Darcy's objections, and never had she been so much disposed to pardon his interference in the views of his friend. But the gloom of Lydia's prospect was shortly cleared away, for she received an invitation from Mrs. Forster, the wife of the colonel of the regiment, to accompany her to Brighton. Off goes Lydia. This invalued friend was a very young woman, and very lately married. A resemblance in good humour and good spirits had recommended her and Lydia to each other, and out of their 3 months' acquaintance, they had been intimate too. TWO, they had been intimate too. They are just really close. The rapture of Lydia on this occasion, her adoration of Mrs. Forster, the delight of Mrs. Benefit, and the mortification of Kitty are scarcely to be described. Do try to describe it, Jane. Wholly inattentive to her sister's feelings, Lydia flew about the house in restless ecstasy, calling for everyone's congratulations and laughing and talking with more violence than ever, whilst the luckless Kitty continued in the parlour, repined at her fate in terms as reasonable as her accent was peevish. As unreasonable as her accent was peevish. I cannot see why Mrs. Foster should not ask me as well as Lydia, said she. Though I am not her particular friend, I have just as much right to be asked as she has, and more too, for I am 2 years older. In vain did Elizabeth attempt to make her reasonable, and Jane too make her resigned. As for Elizabeth herself, this invitation was so far from exciting in her same feelings as in her mother and Lydia, that she considered it as the death warrant of all possibility of common sense for the latter, for Lydia. And detestable as such a step must make her, were it known, she could not help secretly advising her father not to let her go. She said, Lydia is ridiculous, and she should not be going to Brighton, with the whole entire regiment. And detestable as such a step must make her, she could see her father not let her go. She represented to him all the improprieties of Lydia's general behaviour, the little advantage she could derive from the friendship of such a woman as Mrs. Foster, and the probability of her being yet more imprudent with such a companion as Brighton, where the temptations must be greater at home. Must be greater than at home. Got it. He heard her attentively and then said, Lydia will never be easy until she has exposed herself in some public place or other, and we can never expect her to do it with so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances. If you were aware, said Elizabeth, of the very great disadvantages to all of us, to us all, which must arise from the public notice of Lydia's unguarded and imprudent manner. Nay, which has already arisen from it. I am sure you would judge differently in the affair. Already arisen, repeated Mr. Bennet. What, has she frightened away some of your lovers, poor little Lizzie? But do not be downcast. Such squeamish youths as cannot bear to be connected with a little absurdity are not worth a regret. Such squeamish youths as cannot bear to be connected with a little absurdity are not worth a regret. Like, she's so young and she's so absurd that, like, people can not even regret that they know her. Come, let me see the list of pitiful fellows who have been kept aloof by Lydia's folly. Indeed, you are mistaken. I have no such inquiries to resent. It is not of particular, but of general evils, which I am now complaining. Our importance, our respectability in the world must be affected by the wild volatility, the assurance of disdain, of all restraint which mark Lydia's character. Excuse me, for I must speak plainly. If you, my dear father, will not take the trouble of checking her exuberant spirits, and of teaching her that her present pursuits are not to be the business of her life, she will soon be beyond the reach of amendment. What is the business of her life? I thought the whole business of life was to get married and, like, find a husband, and she's, like, doing that. You're jealous. Her character will be fixed, and she will, at 16, be the most determined flirt that ever made herself or her family ridiculous. A flirt, too, in the worst and meanest degree of flirtation, without any attraction beyond youth and a tolerable person. And from the ignorance and emptiness of her mind, wholly unable to ward off any portion of that universal contempt contempt which her rage for admiration will excite. She's an attention-seeking whore. In this danger, Kitty also is comprehended. She will follow wherever Lydia leads, vain, ignorant, idle, and absolutely uncontrolled. Oh, my dear father, can you suppose it possible that they will not be censured and despised wherever they are known, and that their sisters will not be often involved in the disgrace? Mr. Bennet saw that her whole heart was in the subject, and affectionately taking her hand, said in reply, Do not make yourself uneasy, my love. Wherever you and Jane are known, you must be respected and valued, and you will not appear to less advantage of a couple of, or may I say 3 very silly sisters. We shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go to Brighton. Let her go then. Colonel Foster is a sensible man and will keep her out of any real mischief, and she is luckily too poor to be any object of prey to anyone. Really. At Brighton, she will be of less importance, even as a common flirt, than she has been here. The officers will find women better worth their notice. Let us hope, therefore, that her being there may teach her her own insignificance. At any rate, she cannot grow many degrees worse without authorizing us to lock her up for the rest of her life. Oh, Mr. Bennet. With this answer, Elizabeth was forced to be content, but her own opinion continued the same, and she left him disappointed and sorry. It was not in her nature, however, to increase her vexations by dwelling on them. Good for her. She was confident of having performed her duty, and to fret over unavoidable evils, or augment them by anxiety, was no part of her disposition. Good for her. She said, I said what I said, and now I'm going to move on, because there's nothing left that I can do about it. Clearly nobody cares what I think, except me, and I'm not going to be vexed by any of this anymore. I'm not going to fret over unavoidable evils, and I'm not going to augment them by anxiety. I'm taking a note from my mother, because it's never helped when she's running around the house like a frantic woman. Not that women do that, but that's just what she does. Had Lydia and her mother known the substance of her conference with her father, their indignation would hardly have found expression in their united volubility. In Lydia's imagination, a visit to Brighton comprised every possibility of earthly happiness. She saw with the creative eye of fancy the streets of that gay bathing place covered with officers. She saw herself the object of attention to tens and scores of them at present unknown. She saw all the glories of the camp, its tents stretched forth in beauteous uniformity of lines, crowded with the young and the gay, and dazzling with scarlet, and to complete the view, she saw herself seated beneath a tent, tenderly flirting with at least 6 officers at once. Oh, had she known her sister sought to tear her from such prospects and such realities as these, what would have been her sensations? They could have been understood only by her mother, who might have felt nearly the same. Lydia's going to Brighton was all that consoled her for her melancholy conviction of her husband's never attending to go there himself. At least one of us gets to go to the ocean. But they were entirely ignorant of what had passed, and their raptures continued with little intermission to the very day of Lydia's leaving home. They were not privy to knowing that Elizabeth did not want them to go so bad. Elizabeth was now to see Mr. Wickham for the last time, having been frequently in company with him since her return. Agitation was pretty well over. That's good. The agitations of formal partiality entirely so. She had even learnt to detect, in the very gentleness which had first delighted her, an affection and a sameness to disgust and weary. In his present behaviour to herself, moreover, she had a fresh source of displeasure, for the inclination he soon testified of renewing those intentions which had marked the early part of their acquaintance could only serve, after what had since passed, to provoke her. She lost all concern for him in finding herself thus selected as the object of such idle and frivolous gallantry, and while she steadily repressed it, could not but feel the reproof contained in his believing that however long, and for whatever cause, his attentions had been withdrawn, her vanity would be gratified, and her preference secured at any time by their renewal. On the very last day of the regiment's remaining at Meryton, he dined with other of the officers at Longbourn, and so little was Elizabeth disposed to part from him in good humour, that on his making some inquiry as to the manner in which her time had passed at Hunsford, she mentioned Colonel Fitzwilliam's and Mr. Darcy's having both spent 3 weeks at Rosings, and asked him if he was acquainted with the former. You know Colonel Fitzwilliam? He looked surprised, displeased, alarmed. He said they must have told her. They must have told her that I'm a despicable human being. But with a moment's recollection and a returning smile, replied that he had formerly seen him often. And after observing that he was a very gentlemanlike man, asked her how she had liked him. Her answer was warmly in his favour. With an air of indifference, he soon afterwards added, "How long did you say he was at Rosings?" "Nearly 3 weeks. And you saw him frequently?" "Yes, almost every day." "His manners are very different from his cousin's." "Yes, very different. But I think Mr. Darcy improves upon acquaintance." "Indeed," cried Mr. Wickham with a look which did not escape her. "And I pray may I ask—" But checking himself, he added, in a gayer tone, Is it an address that he improves? Is it in address that he improves? Address? Address? Has he deigned to add aught of civility to his ordinary life? For I dare not hope," he continued in a lower and more serious tone, "that he is improved in essentials." Well, we're just going to have to look something up here because I don't know what any of it means, really. It is in address that he improves. Spark Notes. And why not? Wow, this was like scrolling really quickly. And you know what? Whoever is inventing pop-ups, I don't want them anymore. Turn off pop-ups. I don't want to subscribe to everything. Wait, this is just reading the chapter. This is like the whole chapter. Interesting. Where are the notes? I want to know what it means. And pray, may I ask? Like, what's improving an address? Like, what is it? A line from Pride, meaning that while Mr. Darcy's overall character might not change significantly, he does become more polite and civil in how he speaks to others as you get to know him better. Essentially, his address or manner of speaking improves with further acquaintance. Okay. That's what I thought, but it's just address, and then okay, what about essentials? What about essentials? He is improved in essentials? Means that while someone might have made some positive changes in their behavior or attitude, the most important aspects of their character, their core values, remain fundamentally the same. Oh, okay. He's like, I see. Fundamental qualities of a person, not just outward appearances. At his core, for I dare not hope, he continued in a lower and more serious tone, that he is improved in essentials. Okay. He improves superficially. For I dare not hope that he is improved in essentials. Okay. That makes sense to me now. Just address and essentials. It's hard to get to the deeper crap in there, huh? Okay, let's see what Elizabeth says to that. I'll read Wickham again. Indeed, cried Mr. Wickham with a look which did not escape her. And pray may I ask? But checking himself, he added in a gayer tone, Is it in address that he improves? Has he deigned to add aught of civility to his ordinary style? Okay, is he a little more civil? For I dare not hope, he continued in a lower and more serious tone, that he has improved in essentials. Okay, I'm seeing this. I get it. Oh, no, said Elizabeth. In essentials, I believe he is very much whatever he was. While she spoke, Wickham looked as if scarcely knowing whether to rejoice over her words or to distrust their meaning. There was something in her countenance which made him listen with an apprehension and anxious attention while she added, When I said that he improved on acquaintance, I did not mean that his mind or his manners were in a state of improvement, but that from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood. That's tricky. I understand him more fully now in regards to you. That's funny. So take that with a grain of salt. Take that how you will. Wickham's alarm now appeared in a heightened complexion and agitated look. For a few minutes he was silent, till, shaken off his embarrassment, he turned to her again and said in the gentlest accents, "You, who so well know my feelings toward Mr. Darcy, will readily comprehend how sincerely I must rejoice that he is wise enough to assume even the appearance of what is right. His pride in that direction may be of service, if not to himself, to many others, for it must only deter him from such foul misconduct as I have suffered by. I only fear that the sort of cautiousness to which you, I imagine, have been alluding, is merely opted on his visits to his aunt, of whose good opinion and judgment he stands much in awe. His fear of her has always operated, I know, when they were together, and a good deal is to be imputed to his wish of forwarding the match with Miss de Bourgh, which I am certain he has very much at heart." He was on his best behavior. Because Miss de Bourgh, even the assuming appearance is right, is like nice. Interesting. Elizabeth could not repress a smile at this, but she answered only by a slight inclination of the head. She saw that he wanted to engage her on old subjects of his grievances, and she was in no humor to indulge him. "I've heard your story, okay? No thanks." The rest of the evening passed with the appearance, on his side, of usual cheerfulness, but with no further attempt to distinguish Elizabeth. It does feel good to put a person in their little place and watch them a little squirm around. I mean, it's not fun. It's just like, you can just see true colors now. Interesting. Fascinating. But with no further attempt to distinguish Elizabeth, and they parted at last with mutual civility and possibly a mutual desire of never meeting again. I like that. Let's not ever do this, because I think you know the truth about me. When the party broke up, Lydia returned with Mrs. Foster to Meryton, from whence they were to set out early the next morning. The separation between her and her family was rather noisy than pathetic. Lydia is noisy. Kitty was the only one who shed tears, but she did weep from vexation and envy, and not like, I'm going to miss my sister. Mrs. Bennet was diffuse in her good wishes for the felicity of her daughter, and impressive in her injunctions that she should not miss the opportunity of enjoying herself as much as possible. Terrible advice. I want you to enjoy yourself as much as humanly possible on this adventure with a whole regiment of officers and just you, unsupervised. Advice which there was every reason to believe would be well attended to. Lydia will rise to this occasion. And in the clamorous happiness of Lydia herself in bidding farewell, the more gentle adieus of her sister were uttered without being heard. This is fun writing. I mean, nobody writes like this anymore that I know of. Obviously, I haven't read in a long time, but this is fun. It is like another language. Chapter 42. Well, shall we continue on? I've got all the time in the world with this new thing, and we're just going to see how long we can go this morning. Chapter 42. Had Elizabeth's opinion been all drawn from her own family, she could not have formed a very pleasing opinion of conjugal felicity or domestic comfort. Her father, captivated by youth and beauty, and that appearance of good humour which youth and beauty generally give, had married a woman whose weak understanding and illiberal mind had very early in their marriage put an end to all real affection for her. Whoa. Respect, esteem, and confidence had vanished forever, and all his views of domestic happiness were overthrown. We're dropping a little tea on Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's relationship here. Whoa. But Mr. Bennet was not of a disposition to seek comfort for the disappointment which his own imprudence had brought on, in any of those pleasures which too often console the unfortunate for their folly or their vice. He was fond of the country and of books, and from these tastes had arisen his principal enjoyments. To his wife he was very little otherwise indebted, than as her ignorance and folly had contributed to his amusement. He just thinks his wife is a little silly lady. This is not the sort of happiness which a man would in general wish to owe to his wife. But where other powers of entertainment are wanting, the true philosopher will derive benefit from such as are given. Whoa. It's kind of an sad little relationship they have. Okay. Elizabeth, however, had been blind to the impropriety of her father's behavior as a husband. She had always seen it with pain, but respecting his abilities and grateful for his affectionate treatment of herself, she endeavored to forget what she could not overlook, and to banish from her thoughts that continual breach of conjugal obligation and decorum. Are they talking about sex right now? Like there's parents don't have sex anymore? Are we talking about conjugal obligation? Can I just look that up real quick? Are we talking about parents banging right now? Conjugal obligation. Jane Austen. The marriage law. Austen conveys the lived reality of the subjects of the early 19th century law relating to the economic arrangements and premarital sex. Things you do to keep a marriage, but can be described as anything that happens between married people, such as conjugal obligations, which are the things you do to keep marriage going, or just general conjugal or married life. Whoa. Marriage in the works of Jane Austen. Conjugal beneath the fraternal. Jane Austen's in... Whoa. Huh. Conjugal obligations. Okay, maybe we're not talking about parents banging right now. Elizabeth's like, I know you guys don't bang, but your mom's just silly. You have a silly mom. Do you have a serious going to involve obligations, financial, conjugal? We're talking about conjugal. Crazy. Okay, I'm gonna write this down and I'll look up some stuff about it more. I'll look into this more and get back to you. That's such an interesting... What are we talking about, Jane? What are we doing? Continual breach of conjugal obligation and decorum, which in exposing his wife to the contempt of her own children was so highly reprehensible. Okay, let's start at the very beginning of this paragraph. Elizabeth, however, had never been blind to the impropriety of her father's behavior as a husband. She had always seen it with pain, but respecting his abilities and grateful for his affectionate treatment of herself, she endeavored to get what she could not overlook, and to banish from her thoughts the continual breach of conjugal obligation and decorum, which, in exposing his wife to the contempt of her own children, was so highly reprehensible. But she had never felt so strongly as now to the disadvantages which must attend the children of so unsuitable a marriage, nor ever been so fully aware of the evils arising from so ill-judged a direction of talents which, rightly used, might at least have preserved the respectability of his daughters, even if incapable of enlarging the mind of his wife. I'm gonna have to look into this whole paragraph and this whole beginning of this chapter. And I'm going to pause there and I'm going to look some stuff up and we're going to get back to this reading because it's super distracting. I think I just breezed through this the first time. Like, Jane, what are you talking about? Let's move on. Because it sounds like we're talking about your parents' relationship sucks. Which they're probably talking about because I don't know. It looks like she has a lot of opinions about marriage in the time. And I think it's important to understand what you're reading, and I don't right now, and I feel like it's going to be a little project. I'm going to do this little project, and I'm going to come back. Happy reading, everybody. Get into it. Get your notebooks out because we're taking notes, baby. Ta-ta, happy reading. Bye.